make sure everyone's aware that this is one of dozens of events happening around the world for Tortuguita this weekend. And so, yeah, we're gathering here in our community, and we're part as the larger global community as well. And we're sending all of our love and solidarity to Atlanta. All right, I'm going to start with some background information about the occupation of the Atlanta forest. For roughly the last 18 months, environmentalists and police abolitionists have joined forces to occupy the urban Weelaunee Forest in the South Atlanta neighborhood, which is a primarily low-income black and brown community. The Weelaunee Forest has a long history. Originally home to the Muskegee people, since colonization it has served as a plantation land and as a prison farm, which is to say a plantation by another name. For the last few decades, however, the forest has been mainly undisturbed and unoccupied and has served as a valuable natural resource for Atlanta residents with ecologically significant old-growth trees. Now the city intends to hand this land over to the Atlanta Police Foundation for the construction of the so-called Cop City. Their permit would allow for the deforestation of up to 400 acres of Weelaunee and the construction of the largest police training facility in the country, twice the size of the NYPD, and 3 times the size of LAPD. The Cop City plans are for a military-style training compound with shooting ranges, bomb testing sites, and a mock city block. Ultimately, this project is a $90 million playground for cops that doubles as a movie set for New Hollywood capital. Cop City was inspired by the 2020 George Floyd uprising and the murder of Rayshard Brooks by Atlanta PD. The people of Atlanta responded to his death by burning down the Wendy's where he died, and now police are responding with Cop City to prepare them more effectively to suppress future popular movements. We know that these future uprisings are inevitable. Not only have police become more violent since the death of George Floyd, with 2022 having the most deaths at the hands of police of any year on record, but as the climate crisis accelerates and resources become scarce, the highly militarized and ever-expanding police force will serve to steal resources from the working class and protect the wealth of capitalists, which of course has always been the true purpose of policing. So, Cop City will accelerate the climate crisis through deforestation and pollution, leave South Atlanta more vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and threaten their ability to stand together and fight their oppression now and in the decades to come. And it sets a dangerous precedent for the rest of the country to continue scaling up local police forces. These are the reasons why forest defenders like Tortuguita have been living in tree houses for nearly 2 years, and a network of support has been growing in Atlanta and nationwide. At any time, the final permits can be approved and the bulldozers sent in to begin large-scale deforestation. Although I will say at this point, there is no official ban. The park is still a public park. People are allowed to be there. So far, several attempts have led to confrontations with forest defenders, and cops on Wednesday morning entered the forest and shot Tortuguita after finding them in a tent. Cops are claiming that Tortuguita fired first, but the forest defenders have a policy of not keeping weapons in the forest, and Tortuguita was known for talking about non-violence as their preferred political strategy. In addition, on Wednesday, 19 people were arrested, several of whom were charged with domestic terrorism, as were several protesters back in December. Those charges are clearly unreasonable, and already we've seen from previous arrests that they are not likely to hold up well in court. Several times last year, defenders called for a week of action to demonstrate support for their fight, and were met with rallies, film screenings, and more events across the country, including a few we put together here in CT. Now we're gathering under more tragic circumstances. This fight is meaningful to me as a lifelong environmentalist who is learning more and more how the fight against climate change is inseparable from the fight against racial capitalism enforced by violent policing. I am deeply inspired by eco-socialism and the forest defenders who recognize this crucial fact and are making a stand to prove that we don't have to accept our subjugation, but we can take matters into our own hands to decide the fate of the Weelaunee Forest and build a future that works for all of us. Although we lost Tortuguita in the fight this week, We're here to honor their memory and continue the fight, because the fact of the matter is it is not over yet. We still are able to defend the forest. We can save the forest and we can stop Cop City. That's why we're here tonight. As some prominent abolitionists have said before, in order to solve the issue of police brutality, in order to address the climate crisis, we need 1 million experiments happening in all of our communities everywhere, and we need to be supporting each other and learning from each other. But ultimately, there is no answer that will work everywhere for everyone, and it is up to us to build our own solutions. Woo!
Yeah.
So I'm going to quickly end with a paragraph from No More Policing by Mariame Kaba and Andrea J. Ritchie. Came out last year, so it's very current, very interesting, reflections on the 2020 uprising. This paragraph is about how we don't have to wait until we end policing to start building transformative justice now. Regardless of what forms of harm we are contemplating, it is critical to start from a place of possibility. What if we started by thinking about all the situations and circumstances in which transformative justice could prevent, interrupt, and transform harm, rather than those in which we imagine it can't? We work with those who do want to take accountability and learn how to do that well. We can create a culture where more people will choose to take accountability. We can recognize that people who harm are often survivors of harm themselves. As Sared points out, no one enters violence by first committing it. So, thank you all for joining us to celebrate Tortuguita's life. I learned from some comrades yesterday that they had already accepted the possibility of a revolutionary death, and they were accepting of that. And though they were fighting every day to build a better world, they knew at the same time they were not likely to live to see it. So in that same tradition, we're going to continue fighting forward, though we don't really know what tomorrow will bring. But we know that it will be a better world because we're gathering together today.
Thanks, Fiona. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric, and I want to thank you for gathering today to mourn the loss of a true comrade, Manuel Teran, or Tortuguita, as he was known in the woods, and to show support for the forest defenders carrying out the cause Manuel Teran died for. Manuel was a defender of Atlanta's South River Forest and our planet. They were a generous spirit who built homes for those who had been made homeless by hurricanes in their home state of Florida. They fed hungry people in Tallahassee with food, not bombs, and they regularly fed the hungry at the trailhead for South River Forest alongside the rest of the forest defender comrades. What Manuel Teran was trying to stop was the destruction of the forest so the Atlanta Police Academy could expand to build Cop City, an urban warfare training center. Manuel Teran was a peaceful forest defender killed by police in cold blood. The cops say Manuel Teran shot at them first, but we know the cops lied to make themselves look good and cover their asses. In the past, Atlanta PD have been quick to release body cam video that could cast these forest defenders into bad light, but so far the police have released no such body cam video or any evidence to back up their claims. There has also never been evidence of any forest defender carrying a firearm. The cop's story has already changed since the murder of Manuel Teran. This should not be a surprise, as we have seen similar cover-ups happen when police kill people here in Bridgeport, like when the cops killed 15-year-old Jason DeGrone in 2017. We've seen this elsewhere in the state in 2020 when state troopers killed 19-year-old Mubarak Solman in West Haven, or when in June last year New Haven PD lied after they paralyzed Randy Cox from the chest down because they gave him a rough ride in a police van and dragged and threw him around their police department. Hell, I've witnessed the police violence and lies firsthand with my own arrest when the police were supposed to be doing a wellness check on me. We need to always remember that the police lie quickly and easily when it comes to protecting themselves from legal and public opinion backlash when they are violent. What Atlanta PD says about their murder of Manuel Teran is no different. I'm sure we could spend a couple minutes to come up with dozens of examples of police lying to cover their asses across the nation, from Rodney King to George Floyd, or things like the Uvalde school shooting. But I think I've made my point. Manuel Teran was a non-violent forest defender, and he did not deserve to be murdered by those pigs. Along with this murder, 20 forest offenders were arrested and 7 of them facing serious charges of domestic terrorism. Here's Manuel, in his own words, talking about his resistance. The right kind of resistance is peaceful, because that's where we win. We're not going to beat them at violence. They're very, very good at violence. We're not. We win through nonviolence. That's really the only way we can win. We don't want more people to die. We don't want Atlanta to turn into a war zone. I felt compelled to speak here today because I know firsthand what facilities like Cop City are all about. I'm a former infantry marine and I trained in facilities just like it in preparation for my deployment to Afghanistan years ago. These urban warfare facilities are massively wasteful and serious threats to the land, waterways, and air, not to mention extremely unpleasant to live near. There are already too many of these facilities in our country that Atlanta PD can go train at. What is proposed for this facility is multiple gun and explosive ranges and a large burn tower. There will be a mock city to train police on crowd control and urban combat, or in other words, training to violently suppress protests. This facility is planned to be used by other police departments outside Atlanta and Georgia. Police, and maybe even military from America's imperial allies, may also make use of Cop City. It's been suggested by the project's proponents that police forces from apartheid Israel will be welcome to train them. There is even a nearby Hollywood studio that hopes to use Cop City as a filming location. Cop City, if it is built, will poison the environment with lead and heavy metals from the gun and explosive ranges, tear gas from riot control training, gasoline, oil, and lubricants from armored vehicles, noxious fumes from the burn tower, and ungodly noise disturbing wildlife and local communities. Worst of all is that the South River forest habitat will be destroyed. In a lazy and insulting attempt to greenwash this project, they plan on having a portion of Cop City be a public park. Jacqueline Eccles, a local and the board president of the South River Watershed Alliance, had this to say about the Cop City Public Park. Let me put it this way. Whoever thought of the notion that you can create a park-like environment next to the police training facility? You can go out and walk along the trail and just hear the gunfire go off. I mean, it's almost like they are saying, that's what you're used to anyway, right? The neighborhood around South River Forest is working class and over 75% black. This community already has regular sounds of gunfire from one gun range at the police academy disturbing the residents and their pets. They have to deal with the asphalt and truck factories polluting the air and waterways. They have to put up with the indignity of having a sanitation center and a juvenile prison in their backyards. This community deserves to keep the South River Forest as a wild space. South River Forest was not always so wild. It was originally Muskogee land until the federal government forcefully displaced them to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears. White settlers then built a slave plantation there. After the Civil War, the plantation was converted to a prison plantation, which remained in use until 1995. There are still suspected unmarked graves in the woods from its days as a plantation and prison. Allowing nature to return to the woods these past 28 years is the best thing that can happen. Humans should be tending to this process to help this old-growth forest to recover so it can be a stable home for wildlife while it provides benefits to people like cleaner air, water, and act as a carbon sink to help offset our man-made climate catastrophe. In our age of overdevelopment, nothing is more important than protecting spaces like these. Here in Bridgeport, we have our own old-growth forest, Remington Woods, that we need to protect.
Yeah.
It is also under threat of development so that a chemical company can build a chemical processing facility that will likely poison the landscape and local people.
Whoa!
Cop City is a money-making endeavor for the Atlanta Police Foundation, which takes massive donations in the tens of millions from and acts on behalf of wealthy corporations with interests in Atlanta. They want the police better trained to keep people in line so the corporations can continue to extract wealth unimpeded from the land and people of Atlanta. In a world where there is less undeveloped nature to exploit and more people to dominate, it is inevitable that investments will go to projects like Cop City so that the status quo can be violently maintained. This development will also aid gentrification. The people living near South River Forest already have so many pressures on their community, some of which I have talked about. These factors drive people away from the community, and depress their property values. Eventually, a developer will come in and snatch up homes in these neighborhoods for pennies on the dollar and rebuild for other wealthier people to enjoy, while the former residents have to live with the fallout of having their lives uprooted. Shenard Weems, a local resident whose dogs are terrorized by the sounds of gunfire from the existing police gun range, had this to say about the development process for Cop City. This happens literally in my backyard. No one has reached out to me. I do not see, I do see when they ask for votes. I do not see that. I'm not sure they're trying, I'm not sure they're trying to force us out of the community and just take over the whole community overall, but that's what it looks like the path we're heading down. Why are we on this planet? Is it so those of us with money and power can exploit nature and the rest of humanity? Or are we here to resist these historic injustices and live in support of one another and the planet we are blessed with and depend upon? We need to all unite in solidarity to defend nature, to defend each other's right to live in peace, to defend a livable future for all life on this planet. Confronting all this feels daunting, but I think Manuel Teran would want us to take inspiration from their example. Here are some more of their words from an article written about them in the South River Forest Defenders. Am I scared of the state, they said. Pretty silly not to be. I'm a brown person. I might be killed by the police for existing in certain spaces. To cope with that fear, Teran leaned on a quote from Frank Herbert's Dune. Fear is the mind killer. That's a quote I think about often. I am scared, but you can't let the fear stop you from doing things, from living, from existing, from resisting. I bet Teran would agree that we need to organize ourselves to fight for these common goals, and take care of each other. I urge you to join up and support mutual aid groups like Manuel did. Join other groups fighting for justice, like the Connecticut Tenants Union, Connecticut DSA, Justice for Jason here in Bridgeport, BLM 860, and Preserve Remington Woods. We can keep building people power to resist and eventually overcome the unjust state of things. Most importantly, right now, Manuel Teran's comrades, their fellow forest defenders, need our help to get out of jail. So please donate what you can to their bail fund. I want to finish with a few more words from the beautiful soul, Manuel Teran. The abolitionist mission isn't done until every prison is empty. When there are no more cops, when the land has been given back, that's when it's over. I don't expect to live to see that day necessarily. I mean, I hope so. Thank you all for coming out, and the link to donate to their bail fund is here. And come talk to me if you'd like to help out with Preserve Remington Woods and get involved locally here. Thank you.
Hi everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Buzz. I run a herbal medicine mutual aid group here in Bridgeport. I live over in the upper part of the East End. And then I'm also an organizer with Justice for Jason Negron. So I just wanted to give you a couple details about some of this work for prison abolition that does happen here in Bridgeport, and also some of the current things that are going on with the city and the police budget. So Eric touched on Jason's murder. Officer James Boulay, who's still on our police force today, who has multiple lawsuits opened against him for police violence and brutality towards multiple members in our community, including brutalizing an elderly woman in Success Village and punching a handcuffed man in the face and hitting a pregnant woman with his car. These are the kind of people that are on our police force who we are constantly calling for them to fire, and they protect each other. So I kind of jumped the story there though. Jason Negron was a 15-year-old Puerto Rican boy here in Bridgeport who was murdered by James Boulay on Fairfield Avenue, not far from here, on May 9th in 2017. And in 2020, after already a long fight for justice, there was a 7-day prison abolition protest encampment outside of the Bridgeport Police Department. It was during the George Floyd uprises. And City Council gave us a list of resolutions. We had, I think it was 11 demands. They gave us 6 resolutions in order for us to disband. So we agreed and we disband, and they kept tabling our demands and tabling our demands. Then we found out that they were trying to do a secret round table. We had more protesting. Long story short, nothing got done. Here we are 2.5 years later. When the budget was up for reappropriation in 2021, they were, according to the resolution, supposed to defund the police department, demilitarize. I've literally seen a tank roll down my street and arrest my black neighbor up against my fence during 2020. So they're supposed to be demilitarizing, defunding, and investing into things like our school system and public safety, community safety. When the budget was up for reappropriation in 2021, they actually raised it by $5 million. So no, they did not take any money at all from the Bridgeport Police Department. Before the budget appropriation, we already had the highest police budget in the entire state of Connecticut, when we are not the city with the largest violent crime, the highest violent crime rate, whatever that even means. Yeah, we have a $107 million police budget here in Bridgeport. However, 2 of our middle schools, Wilbur Cross and Thomas Hooker, are the 7th and 8th grade are about to be merged together because of a teacher shortage, and we don't even have a legitimate superintendent. So we have police money like crazy, but we have nothing for things like our schools or our houseless population or other vulnerable communities. So I just wanted to touch on some of this because this is real stuff that's happening now. I mean, I'm an abolitionist. I don't really care as much for voting, but it is election season this year. And so for those of you that do live in Bridgeport, just make sure that you pay attention to who's knocking on your door and bring up these issues so that they know that people care about how our police treat us here in Bridgeport. They just hired 60 new police officers, and we have a new chief of police. Mind you, after our encampment, the FBI came in and arrested and indicted AJ Perez, who was our chief of police in Bridgeport, because he was not qualified. He was Mayor Ganem, who is still our mayor. He was his driver. So that is all. I just wanted to share all that juicy information with all of you. Thank you for listening.
My name is Stanley Heller, and I work for Promoting Enduring Peace and the Struggle Video News. This is just a few days after the 3rd anniversary of the killing of Mubarak Solomon in West Haven. That was January 15 of 20. And, you know, it was a terrible thing. If you don't know the story, he had problems, some mental breakdown, probably. That's what his family thinks. And he took a car and he drove into West Haven. But none of that matters because the car was surrounded by state trooper car and West Haven police car. He had nowhere to go. His car was off. And so he's completely surrounded. So what does a policeman do? Pulls out a gun. Several guns were pulled on him. And within about a minute and a half, a state trooper shot him 7 times through a closed window of the car that he was in. Because the family and friends and people who believed in human rights kept pressing the matter and having demonstrations, and because of all the others for Jason Negron and all the other things that have been going on in Connecticut, the state trooper was actually indicted. And this process is going on. It'll probably be a couple of years, but evidently he will be put on trial. And I hope efforts will continue, public efforts, to keep the pressure on. Because in West Haven, where I used to live, there's been no self-examination that the West Haven police took part in this and didn't say anything like, he's surrounded, why don't we put down the guns? They were all part of this process. By the way, as far as I know, the state trooper is still employed. He might be suspended or something, but he may be getting pay. You haven't heard a word from Lamont saying that he ought to be fired. You know, when George Floyd was killed, the mayor of Minneapolis immediately called for his firing and then later called for his arrest. None of that happened with any of these politicians. Not Lamont, not the mayor of West Haven, etc. Another thing that was brought up by Eric was Israel and the Atlanta police, and that they may be involved in this. There was something on that in Democracy Now! Just yesterday, saying that there's some kind of police training.
So IDF
program.
is actually going to be doing training of the police. They're not there to get
Why don't you come over here and say it if you want on the camera.
IDF is there to actually teach the cops how to be more violent, how to kill people better. So they already know how to do that quite well. We see what happens in Palestine on a daily basis. So that's the purpose. You know, the Hollywood. We know what Hollywood's like. They'll cash in on anything. So you know, this is real life. Like this isn't. I don't know what's entertaining about watching people killing each other. So we can keep watching that happening on our phones every day, or we can do something like we're doing right now, like Tortuga decided to do.
I just want to say a couple more words about this police exchange program. It was set up by a thing called the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, which was set up over 100 years ago to defend Jews against lies. But it got, you know, it was always conservative, always with the cops and the government. And whenever there's a hate crime, you see one of their people talk on TV. But they actually set up this program so that U.S. police and Israeli police could help each other out and teach each other things. And my God, you know what they teach them over there. Maybe not how to kill, as was said, they know how to kill. But the Israeli practice of thinking that the minority, so-called, is all terrorists. You know, always suspect. You got to be very suspicious of all of them, and you know, treat them as harshly as possible. And so that's what the ADL brokered program is doing, and it's a real disgrace. There is a group in the U.S., Jewish Voice for Peace, which set up a campaign. Forgetting what it's called, the Deadly Exchange, they call it. And they've been putting pressure on them. But that's one part of this thing that you all should know about, and don't trust the ADL for anything. Thanks.
My name is Christine Gavreau, and I work with 350 Connecticut. I'm very moved to be here with you all tonight. I think moments like this really challenge us. As Fiona said, first to imagine how we're going to build the kind of movement that can defeat this madness and murder and destruction of nature. Fiona said, you know, we need hundreds of experiments, and we surely do need that. But when I look at the bipartisan agreement on escalating repression, using the opportunity of the right-wing mobilizations on January 6th to enact legislation and to normalize repression that will be focused honestly, truly, as always, instead on the left. So when we're facing something so grand and something so determined, with the complete support of both political parties and all of their big corporate backers, what kind of movement can we build that can actually defeat them? 350 Connecticut has a strategy we call mass action. What does that mean? It's something we haven't been able to do much of since the George Floyd moment. But what does it mean? It means we have to build our movement independent of the Democratic and Republican parties. We have to look for the sources of power that lie in our control. What are those sources of power? Well, when the rail workers threatened to strike, and they said, and the idea, there was the possibility that they could shut down the country, and with many of their leadership, their vanguard leaders saying, we have to nationalize the railroads, we have to put it under our control and community control, and use this to solve the part of the climate crisis. That's where we have power. We have tremendous power in sector after sector. How do we get to the place where we can mobilize that power? I'm old as dirt, and I still remember moments where we built mass movements, where millions of people came together regularly, like clockwork in the streets. Millions of people around the anti-Vietnam War movement. You might think that's old hat. What's the point of that? Isn't it just a parade? It wasn't a parade because it gave confidence to the soldiers in uniform, and they began to join in uniform, marching in the streets against the very war that they had been drafted to fight. And the workers in the Lordstown auto plants, who just came out of that army, began to organize wildcat strikes, and they began to rebel in all aspects of social life. And they all felt confident to do it because suddenly they knew they weren't alone in a new way, where you looked out the window, I mean even Nixon, the president's wife looked out the window and said, oh my God, it's a revolution. Is this the revolution? So it wasn't, but those images where we come together from all walks of life, wearing the garb of our occupations, wearing our union buttons and jackets, fighting to bring our neighbors, each neighbor, each member of our church, for one day of important action, that can be a moment that begins where we begin to build the kind of mass movement involving millions that actually can make the kind of social change we need. The social change we need to save the planet is more dramatic than anything humans have ever confronted. Working people in the French Revolution, working people in the Russian Revolution, working people during Vietnam. It's the greatest challenge humanity has ever faced. And we can have 1,000 experiments, and we should, but we can't overlook the big lessons from history, that the things that topple governments, that allow new forces to take power, to reorganize all of production and transportation and housing and healthcare and the very way that we manage to live and work with the planet. That takes millions in action, not just the examples of one or two brave, heroic people, but the day-to-day work to put millions out there and let them have the experiences where they can actually envision, yes, we're going to take power and organize it and implement it in our interest, right? That takes big conferences with Democratic votes. It takes big debates where among all the political tendencies in the climate movement and in the police brutality movement, the labor movement, all together debating how we're going to save this situation. Anyway, when I'm here tonight with you, I know that road is possible. We're all going to be part of building that movement. We have all kinds of differences, tactics and strategy, but fundamentally at this moment, I think the greatest, expression of solidarity toward Turkita is to say, yes, we are going to go forward and build that movement. And if you like that perspective, come to 350 meeting tomorrow. Fiona's going to speak on perspectives, and we can discuss how to go forward from this moment trying to build something more massive in support at this moment for the forest defenders in Atlanta and the Black community that has been integral to this struggle. Thanks.
I just want to take a moment to just sit in how fucking grim everything we've just heard is. Because I hate how when I was listening to all of that, it just felt so normal that this guy trying to fight against the police digging up a forest filled with the dead bodies of plantation slaves in order to create a new institution a new building so they can teach themselves how to import the methods of an apartheid regime against us that they killed him to make that happen, and that feels normal in America at this point. I'm not okay with it. It's not right, and we need to take action. And I think that more than anything else, the thing that we need to keep in mind above everything else is that what it takes to change the world is for enough people to say that we will stop at nothing and that we will accept any sacrifice to make this change. Wanting it is enough to make the fight happen. Believing that is enough to make the change happen if we actually want to if we're willing to transform it into action. And I just need to say that, we can't let this murder stand we can't let it stand and let them get away with it and let them build this place. And we can't let them get away with the murder of Jason Negron without firing the entire fucking Bridgeport Police Department and washing it down with fucking bleach.
Yes!
I'll just add something quickly. I find it fitting that for someone who really stood for nonviolence, that his life is bookended both by Martin Luther King Jr. and Thich Nhat Hanh. He passed away last January 28th, 2021, and Martin had nominated Thich Nhat Hanh for the Nobel Peace Prize. These were two people who truly admired each other's grit, determination, principles, values in struggling with the Vietnam War, with civil rights, with just all the messes that we're still feeling today and that have been just intensifying. And so yeah, it's a matter of determination, and it's a matter of learning from great people like them who have seen that everybody has the capacity for change. Change isn't something that's out there. Change is something that starts in our hearts, and and the ability to see things being able to be different, like even in the worst, most disgusting, heartbreaking things that have happened in the past. There's no reason we need to submit ourselves to things like that being repeated over and over and over again, because violence and killing, like it takes different forms, but it's always the same thing. You know, like hatred, confusion. Those cops that killed, they're terrified, weak people. They don't know how to use anything except for metal, bullets. Like they don't know the true strength of conviction and vision. That's all they know, and so that's all they can do. All they can do is just keep killing and being scared. So it's up to all of us to create something else.